Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different, but a little necessary, very, very important. Today we are talking to Congress about all of the craziness going on in our country. So I'm going to introduce you to who we have today, Congressman Greg Landsman. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to jump right into it. Obviously, there's tons of craziness going on. Currently, we know of about 9 people who've been killed by ICE this year. And we've seen massive historic resistance out of Minnesota right now. As a member of Congress, what can you tell us about what's being done internally to help prevent more killings?
So a couple of things. One is there's the DHS funding bill. That's the Department of Homeland Security, and most of us on the Democratic side voted against it last week in the House. It's now being held up by Democrats in the Senate. Though the rest of the budget bill should pass, and hopefully that's what Republicans allow, is for all of the other government funding pieces to pass so that we can just have a debate and argument, fight over DHS. And even if we hold that budget bill and don't pass it, DHS has enough money. But I think it's really important for us to hold it until they, not just pursue, but implement sweeping reforms. And we have proposed, those reforms. And so many of us have legislation. That's the second thing, is pieces of legislation to change what's going on with DHS. Mine, it focuses on requiring immigration enforcement to work with local law enforcement. So whenever they go into a community, they have to do so in partnership with local law enforcement, where they are entering into a legally binding agreement, an MOU. They have to follow the rules of that local police department or sheriff's department, and that means that they have to align with their recruitment and their training protocols. They have to wear body cameras. They, have to, wear a badge, and they have to announce themselves. They can't wear masks. They can't show up in unmarked cars. They have to follow the law, all of the laws. So that's the second piece. The third is the litigation work that's going on. We're supporting in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. There's a couple pieces to it. One is getting them out, and so that process is hopefully nearing its end, and a judge will rule that they need to leave because they have created a public safety crisis in Minneapolis. The second has to do with protecting evidence. So the evidence surrounding all of these events must be given to local law enforcement so that thorough investigations can be done. And a judge has said to DHS, you have to maintain the evidence. You cannot take it from the state. You have to give it to local law enforcement. They disregarded that judge's order, so a judge is now hearing contempt charge, considering contempt charges. But my worry is that they are going to continue to lie and try to get away with this unlawful, chaotic, deadly, behavior. And the evidence and the investigation is hugely important in terms of holding people accountable and making sure it doesn't ever happen again. So those are a few big things that are happening, and I suspect you'll see more communications and organizing, potential marches and those kinds of things outside of Minneapolis. But legally, legislatively, and of course the appropriations piece is those are the things that are most in play right now.
Yeah. So, what can you tell us about why ICE agents specifically are permitted to show up wearing masks and like hiding their identity and unmarked cars? Like, where does that come from? That seems like, just as a citizen, very jarring to me and like random. Like, where did that come from? Do you know?
I don't. I mean, it's a newer agency, right? Like it didn't really exist.
Pre 9/11, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think it was even later.
Yeah, I believe it was 2003, but I know specifically the events that took place on 9/11 definitely
Yeah.
encouraged the enactment of it. Yeah.
So it's a newer agency. I wasn't there when that law passed. It's a really good question. I don't believe that it is lawful for them to be doing what they're doing. But this administration has been operating outside the law
Right.
on almost every front, and so they don't really care what the law says. They care what they can get away with, and so far they've been able to get away with showing up in unmarked cars
Right.
and hiding their faces and not wearing body cameras. And so, I think part of it was that Congress has been slow to act. I mean, the Republicans who control Congress refuse to stand up to this president. They're starting to show a little backbone, but they hadn't. And in this funding bill, we got some changes. One of them was body cameras. So if this funding bill does pass, there are body cameras, the requirement that they have body cameras in the legislation. Obviously, we want more, and so most of us voted against it because it doesn't go far enough. But I think it's just that it's a newer agency, so not everything has been, resolved legislatively, and this is an administration that overlooks the law, and in some instances disregards the law in order to do whatever they want.
Right. So my question is, as far as it relates to the budget restructuring that you all are trying to advocate for in Congress right now, where do these petitions come from? And I ask that specifically because from what I've been seeing, talking to fellow citizens, specifically the people in Minnesota and the people who are on the left side of the aisle who typically vote Democrat, what I have seen is a request for an abolishment of this agency, not necessarily a defunding. So I guess where is the discrepancy? How much are the citizens' wishes and wants taken into account when it comes to actually putting in some of these policies? And where is that discrepancy? Where did that discrepancy lie?
Well, I mean, there's a range of perspectives on this, right? From what they're doing, Minneapolis is perfectly normal and it's totally fine, and they're just going after violent criminals, and then people just get in the way, and if you get in the way, you suffer the consequences. That's on one end, right? And then
Right.
on the other end is this idea, well, like you just get rid of ICE and immigration enforcement altogether. Most people, at least in my district, most people are somewhere in the middle. And I think the consensus that I get, and I think you see this in the polling, is that people want some immigration reform or immigration enforcement. There are some people here who are, as I was at City Hall for years on City Council and worked with our police department very closely, and there were some folks here who were here, and they were, beating a girlfriend, or they had, stolen a car or whatever it was, and police wanted some help from immigration enforcement to say, we want them out of our community, and most of the people in that community were the ones asking for them to be removed, because they were causing all kinds of issues. And so I believe that you have to have some immigration enforcement, and so, I don't think you get rid of it. However, I do believe that it should operate with the best practices that the best, police department in the country has, and that is what's best for public safety. It's not just because of my ideology on these things. It's just that is what helps most in terms of keeping people safe, including police officers. If you recruit really good people, you're going to have better results. If you have really good training, you're going to have better results. If you have really good protocols and policies, you're going to have better results, and it keeps everyone safe, including the officers. And so that's what I would like to see is it's a federal law enforcement agency. And the FBI is another federal law enforcement agency, and it's not perfect, but they are serious about recruitment. They are
Right.
serious about training. They are serious about their rules, and everyone should be that serious. Certainly, another federal agency.
So, upon doing some research just about policies, about a lot of the party placement specifically. I know there's, of course, the Democratic values and then the Republican values, and the point is that they're very, very polarizing and different. But I will say, based on some of the research I've done, a lot of the data points to showing that illegal immigration is not a major issue in the country in the way in which Republicans make it, for sure. And they actually show that they have benefits to our economy. And even when we look at folks who are currently undocumented, it's merely a clerical administrative issue. So what would be the purpose of having a militarized armed force? Because as you said, sure, we do need to have some agency to enforce these laws for people who are currently undocumented. But how do we go from that to a militarized, aggressive force?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question, and I think there's a couple explanations. One is, the people who are in charge now are zealots. They're fanatics about this, and they want to, do exactly what you're seeing, which is to militarize this agency, and have these huge shows of support, of force. They want the big vehicles, and the heavy ammunition and all that stuff, and it's not necessary. It's bad policing, and it's intended to incite, I think, chaos and violence. They're trying to pick a fight.
Yeah.
Because if you're serving a warrant, because again, we do this all the time when I was at City Hall. You're serving a warrant, you call our police department, you say, hey, we got a guy, he's down the street, you say, okay. And our cops usually go with him. So they serve the warrant, that's it. And then, they get their guy. And there's nothing. That's not what you're seeing. You're seeing, I think, an intent to provoke, and to incite, chaos and a reaction. And they got that, but then they went too far, way, way, way too far, and they killed multiple people. I mean, they tear gassed this infant. This story didn't get as much of attention. Because it wasn't filmed. I mean, so much of this is happening, or it becomes newsworthy because it was filmed. Unfortunately, some of the murders or deaths, depending on what the investigations find out. I mean, there was a guy who in El Paso, was deemed died in ICE custody, and the coroner ruled it death by asphyxiation. Someone strangled the guy or put a knee on his throat. That was just a couple of days ago. And we don't have video of that. If we had video of that, it would be on it'd be everywhere. If we had video of this infant being tear gassed, I mean, did you hear this story?
Yeah, I think they were 6 months. The baby was 6 months old.
And then they refused to help resuscitate the baby.
Right.
I mean, it's like it's broken. This group is unhinged, and they need to be removed. And new people need to be in charge. And I think we need new leadership altogether. I think part of it is even more sort of corrupt. Like in addition to their own sort of obsession with this issue and how to handle it, they appropriated billions and billions of dollars to create these mass incarceration facilities.
Right.
And Trump's big donors get the contracts.
Yeah.
I mean, they're making billions and billions of dollars locking these people up, so it's a money game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been made clear for a while. Money has always been kind of like, not to be cliche, but kind of the root of the evil a lot of times, especially in this country. When we kind of follow those money trails, we definitely see, those correlation. I want to talk about specifically Minnesota being targeted, because I think a lot of people have questions about that. They show some of the lowest undocumented populations, especially if you compare it to Texas or Florida. Do you know why there's such an excessive force right now in Minnesota? And do you think that there's a correlation to it being a blue state?
Yeah. I mean, he's only picking on blue states. He's trying to pick these fights. I mean, this is not to your point, it's not really an immigration hotspot. And Governor Walz joined our caucus meeting. So the Democrats caucus, and we had an emergency meeting the day after Alex Pretty was killed, and he got on there and he said, they're focused on us because of me, and the fact that we have a big Somali population. This is a group of black immigrants, and so there's a racial piece to it, and that's one of the reasons why he keeps going after Ilhan Omar, the member of Congress who was attacked last night.
Right.
And instead of showing any sympathy, Trump accused her of attacking herself. Just an insane thing for anyone to say. Certainly, the president of the United States. And then the most sort of awful but probably true explanation for Minnesota is that Trump has continued to say over and over that he won Minnesota. And he is, through Pam Bondi, saying, we will leave Minneapolis if you give us the voting rolls.
Right.
And so it may have a lot to do with him, again, trying to convince people he won in this ongoing attempt to steal that election.
I definitely think there's a correlation there. I was definitely going to ask about that, and I think that that's very clear. I think there's a lot of very clearly unconstitutional things going on. Trump and his administration have been caught lying about the details of the murders of both Renee Good and Alex Pretty, insinuating that they were aggressors and threatened the lives of these ICE agents. Renee was shot 4 times at close range, and Alex 10 times in his back and chest at close range. And it was an obvious use of excessive force and overkill. What can Congress do to hold this administration responsible for lying to the American people? Because I think that that's important as well. You should be held accountable for doing that.
I think this is arguably the most important piece right now. I mean, we got to obviously see change, but part of the way you see change and ensure nothing like this ever happens again is that you have to have an investigation, a thorough investigation. The facts have to get out. And if they don't, this stuff just keeps happening. And so in Minneapolis and Minnesota, they're working through the courts to get all of the evidence. And there's a contempt hearing, I think it was yesterday, but they're going to be found, having defied a judge's order because the judge says you got to keep all the evidence here and give it to local law enforcement. That's key to having an independent investigation. DHS cannot do this investigation. That's not you have to have an independent investigation, whether it's local police or somebody else. Somebody has to thoroughly investigate in the most transparent and public way so everybody knows what happened. The second is Congress. Congress needs to hold hearings. We have started to push for hearings. We don't have control over. We don't have the gavels, as they say, so we don't control the committees. But we are putting pressure on our Republican colleagues to hold hearings. Certainly, whether we get a hearing or not, we'll do our own investigation. Assuming if we can take back the House and we do get the gavels, we will do our own investigation.
Yeah, I think taking back the House is definitely important, especially considering this is like a super important election year, and that's kind of what we need to realign balance of power. What I have seen, just based off of, again, talking to fellow constituents, we are at odds in the Democratic Party. I think there is a tug and pull about what exactly is the right thing to do, but more so, a lot of us feel unheard by politicians. We feel like we're saying this is what we want, this is what we need, this is what's better, this is, based off of research, but then we see something completely change, and it's a bit frustrating. In 2020, after mass protests erupted due to the killing of George Floyd, we as citizens called for a defunding of the police. Because as we know from studies, police presence does not prevent crime, resources in our community, and access does. The goal was to reinvest the defunded police budget back into our communities. Many Democrats use our demands to run for office only to backtrack and vote for additional funding for the police. How can we be sure that the same thing won't happen with everything that's happening with ICE right now? Like I said, there's two parties, right? There's 2 parts to it. There's some people who's calling for a complete abolition of the ICE, and there's some people saying we at least need to start with defunding. what can we do as voters to hold these Democrats responsible and accountable for making sure that they are aligning with the voice of the people?
I mean, you should find people who, if that's what you believe, that support that. There are members of Congress who do support that. Not that many. I'm not one of those members. Again, I come from a different district than maybe some of these other folks, but I was on the ground and at City Hall during the George Floyd protests, and there were several hundred people that showed up to City Hall on a regular basis calling for the defunding of police. But the vast majority of the city, 80-90% of people, did not want that. They wanted to make sure that they didn't lose their police. That especially in places where there's a lot of crime, they didn't, in black neighborhoods, they did not want their cops being pulled off the street.
Do you think that's because of a lack of information of what defunding the police could mean potentially? I think that what I see a lot of times is there's a lot of misinformation about policy placements. Even this idea of universal health care has been co-opted to seem as though it's completely impossible and it's going to hurt you actually, versus using the real actual data. And there's real data to show that police presence in and of itself does not prevent crime, because we see the crime happening right now. And if there's no correlation with that, and if we use the data that we have to back up the claims, and we see how the investment of resources can detract crime, we can use Baltimore as an example. Instead of adding more police into those inner cities, giving those people more resources and access shows far more evidence of crime reduction than anything else. I think it's more a conversation of everybody being involved versus using scare tactics, which is a Republican tactic.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone needs to get involved is right. And so, I mean, I think when you talk to folks who, like me, who support, the police and want to see our police department and our fire departments, our public safety institutions well funded, we also want to see all of the investments that really do lead to a decrease in crime. I mean, having officers, if your house gets broken into, you want a cop to show up. If there's a guy in your backyard, you want a cop to show up. There are, situations where if you're being your safety is an issue, you want a police officer to show up. Even if your car gets broken in, you want a cop to show up. Now, are we so sort of myopic that we can't also appreciate the fact that, like, for me, I'm a big believer that you got to invest in prenatal care. Like, you got to do everything, but like prenatal care and child care and preschool, things that I've been advocating for a long time, make a huge difference in terms of helping people grow up and get to a good place academically and otherwise. Investing in that is a huge priority. The same thing with mental health and other behavioral health works. I just got secured in this budget money for police cameras and mental health units. Like, you can do both. Like, you have to do both. And I think the idea that it's one or the other is where I think we kind of lose some ground, because most people appreciate that you do have to have both.
I think that especially now, having both is important. I don't think that we're at a place where we can completely cut off things immediately, because everything needs to kind of have gradual change for sure. But I also think that considering where police budgets go to, a lot of the times to the militarization of our police, and I think that that is kind of where a lot of people are kind of hesitant to continuously give money to the policing, because sure, we see body cam footage, but then we also know that police turn their body cams off a lot of times. Also, we have all these video evidence of killings, and it doesn't really stop it, is what we have seen. And so it's a tug and pull.
Well, I just say, like, in Cincinnati, and this is fair, I don't know the police department. In Cincinnati, our reform started a long time ago because we had we entered in a consent decree, and we had our own issue in 2001 with a police shooting, but we have had enormous success in terms of dramatically reducing the number of police-involved shootings, and a lot of that's training, a lot of that's the way in which we hire and who we hire, the culture. And the fact that, as far as I know, I don't think our police officers would ever turn off a body camera, ever. So, I do put a lot of stock into training and recruitment and culture and leadership. And I'll just say this as a way of sort of wrapping it up in terms of the way I see it. From my experience, you can under-police, and that's a problem, right? Like if you just sort of back off, and the same with the border. When it was just sort of like, they seemed like there were no rules, and you had so many people come in, and it overwhelmed the system, and there were all these people that that live in these communities. They got sort of put on a waiting list because other people were coming in and needing those beds or needing those services, and then you can over police. Which is what you're seeing now. Both are bad, in my opinion. Both are bad. I don't think you want to over-police, and you don't want to under-police. And I think striking that right balance does require, really good leadership and really good policy.
Yeah. I mean, definitely a lot of things have to be done simultaneously, for sure. We got a lot of work to do in general. The United States has a very strong and long-standing relationship with Israel, currently an apartheid state that's currently carrying out a genocide in Palestine. Our government has continuously greenlit billions of dollars every year to aid Israel in its defense, and we allow for the Israeli occupation force to train the police and ICE agents. We can see that those contributions have led to the militarization on domestic grounds. As a member of Congress, what insight can you give us on the justification for voting for continuous aid to a foreign state that has continuously interfered with domestic issues?
Well, a couple of things. One is I am going to really struggle with the fact that in there is this idea that Israel is somehow interfering with or training ICE. Yeah, look, there's so many crazy things that people say about Israel. I'm not going to get into all this. I'll just tell you that the United States funds supports a lot of countries around the world. It's a good thing. It's part of our national security strategy. Pulling back from that would be problematic, in my opinion, certainly as it relates to Israel. In Israel, you have 2 million Palestinians or Arab Israelis. They run their own towns. They vote. They're on the Supreme Court. They have their own, soccer teams. Like, it's not an apartheid state. While the war was awful and it's terrible and I hated it, genocide is an intent to kill, get rid of some or all of an entire community. That's just not the case. But
that's what's happening. That's what's happening, and that's what's been confirmed by many scholars, many people on the grounds.
It's also there's also a ton of people, including myself, who would tell you that the history of anti-Semitism is the history of blood libels, and the idea that you take something that may have been bad and you turn it into Jews are evil, which is genocide. That is the claim of genocide, which is that these Jewish leaders in Israel aren't just fighting Hamas and trying to, end, Hamas's terrorist, governing awfulness, but that they're intending to just kill as many innocent Palestinians as they can, which is just not true.
That has been said by some of the officials,
I don't know which officials.
Netanyahu
doesn't say that.
He has said that.
He has not said that. And anyway, we were supposed to be done at 4. Mm-hmm. I gotta go because I'm now 7 minutes late to something. But we disagree on this fundamentally, but we certainly agree on other things. So hopefully we'll find time to talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Take care.